Hello, my ghouls. So today we're going to do something a little different. It's kind of along the same theme as the Haunted Saskatchewan, except it has to do with the KDK Ghoul Community. As some of you may know, I started the KDK Ghoul Community. Initially, it was more just for a book club, a horror book club or paranormal, thriller, those type of genres. And it's kind of grown a lot since then. So now we have the Biblia Ghoul Horror Book Club. We also have the Logo Ghoul Writing Group, which meets monthly to discuss different writing challenges and talk about horror writing and thriller writing and that kind of thing. And we also have the ParaGhoul Paranormal Community. And so today I thought I would interview one of the people from the ParaGhoul Paranormal Community. His name is Josh. And he also is interested in all things Saskatchewan and paranormal. He actually has a series on his TikTok called Scary Saskatchewan. If you want to check that out, his handle is at you say whoa on TikTok. And he also is the host of a online radio show. And the online radio show you can find on Cosmos Astrum Radio. And his show is called The Curious Narrative. And funny enough, I was just on it with him yesterday and he interviewed me. So today we're going to turn it around and I'm going to interview him. So I guess first things first is hello. Well,
Greetings. Hello there.
thank you for jumping on this interview with me. It's kind of a new little series I'm trying out, as the KDK Ghoul community is growing. It's kind of fun to interview some of the members and see what everyone's up to and the community, especially since it's so many Saskatchewan based people. It's kind of fun that way to get to interview everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess let's go start with what made you interested in the paranormal?
That's an interesting question. I think a big part of it growing up, I had lots of cousins who I think had very active imaginations. And so there were always many stories about things in our house when my cousins would come to visit. And I did not have those experiences or see what they claim to have seen. And now going back and thinking about it, like it's just too far fetched to have been a real thing. And so, um, but being in that whole environment, I guess, if that's what you want to call it, really got me thinking. And so it's always just been an interest of mine. And I think even just getting hooked on like horror movies as a kid. I know I was probably too young the first time I watched The Exorcist, but that is of course more of the horror side of things and not paranormal. But it all just kind of blended together and created um, this cool place for me to kind of uh, imagine what life could be like if things were real in that regard. And not to say that things aren't real, but I'm still searching for my experience that will validate things for me.
The real ghost experience.
Exactly. Yes, yes. And I don't know what that's going to be yet. Maybe because I've heard lots of things, but I haven't seen anything yet. And I think if I were to see something, that might be
That would be enough.
what exactly. Yeah, for sure.
So an opening door by itself or,
Well,
something unusual.
that's what's interesting. The opening door thing, that I don't know where we're going with the conversation, but that would probably be a good segue into what I think is probably my most terrifying paranormal experience that I've had. So
Oh,
we
well,
can touch
definitely.
on that if you'd like.
For
Um,
sure. That's always interesting.
yeah. So many years ago, probably 12 years ago now, maybe even 13. I used to work for an organization here in the province, a heritage organization, and we had conducted a bunch of investigations, paranormal investigations, and we worked with a Saskatchewan-based investigation group, and I had the chance to go on each and every investigation. And I think all told, we had 14 or 17 investigations
Oh, wow.
that we conducted. And so the one experience that I had actually happened in North Battleford. And we were in this old farmhouse. And the process that the investigators used when, starting an investigation for the first time, they would arrive on site and then they would do kind of a walkthrough of the space just to get a feel for it.
Right.
And then they would begin the process of setting up all of their equipment. And what was interesting that day, I remembered very clearly, it was like a July day in Saskatchewan. It was 30 plus degrees. It was very humid. And I remember going in and out of the house with the investigators doing the walkthrough, and they wanted to check in the attic. And so,
Right.
this being an old farmhouse, we had to use a skeleton key to unlock the door, and we went up to the attic. There was nothing there that could potentially contaminate evidence or that might, create a false sense of activity. And so we came down and we closed the door. We did not lock it because we thought maybe we'd want to go back up there later in the evening. And so we wound up just closing the door, but because of the weather conditions and it being so humid and this old farmhouse with the wooden door frames and the wooden door, it was swollen to the point where you basically had to really kind of smash the corner of the door in
Right.
to close it. And uh, we did that. We set up our equipment. Nightfall came, and in this instance, we were still under the assumption that you had to be doing things in the dark. And so we there were three of us in my group, and one of the investigators had to leave early that night. So she wound up leaving for home. And then me and one of my coworkers actually stuck around, and we decided, because by this point, like, we weren't seasoned investigators, but we had been involved enough that we had enough of a basic understanding that we felt comfortable, setting out on our own. And so we went into this house and we had walked through all of the rooms in the house, and we were trying to find a place where we wanted to do an EVP session.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we, like I said, came through the house, went through the house into each and every bedroom on the second floor. And we wound up going into what was set up as a kid's room. And so there's some toys on the floor. And my partner, she sat down on the floor, and I was about to take a seat. And as I'm about to sit down, she says, "If there's anything here with us, can you move these toys? Can you move these toys across the floor?" And I had not taken a seat on the ground before we had heard. In the moment, it sounded like this, uh, like a banging or a crashing sound,
Right.
and I shot up like a rocket, and it scared me. And she stayed very calm. I don't know how, and I just remember her saying, "Oh, there's somebody that came in the house," and because she thought somebody had maybe come through the front door. And so I remember shouting out hello, and no response. I shouted out hello a second time. And I wish that I had the audio, because, like, listening to the audio from the recording, you could hear the fear in my voice. And it felt like an eternity. And I remember radioing the other teams to see if somebody had, in fact, come through the front door. No response. And at that point, I'm like, I'm stuck in this house with who knows what. And, like, nobody's responding to me. And so, like, I was panicked a little bit.
Yeah, no
I'll
doubt.
be honest. And eventually, though, the lead investigator did message me back, or walkie talkie back, and say, "Hey, nobody else came in the house. Like, you guys are the only ones in there still." And so eventually we had, well, I think she had always maintained her composure, and I regained mine. And we then, came out of the room. And the only thing that was out of place was that attic door, and it was wide
Oh.
open. And we know that it was closed. Like I said, the whole process that we had to go through to make sure it was closed to begin with earlier in the day, but also that door, because it wasn't like the pull down from the ceiling attic door, it
Hmm.
was like your typical, upright bedroom door type of
Yeah.
thing. And when that door was open, it blocked one of the bedrooms. And of course, we had walked through all of the bedrooms in that
Oh, that's
house.
right. Yeah.
And so we would have noticed if the door was open. Um, and so I don't know who or what kicked that door open and escaped, but something did.
Something
um,
was letting you know it was there.
exactly. And uh, the unfortunate thing is we did have like in stationary infrared cameras set up on the second floor, except we weren't expecting anything to happen with the attic door. The cameras were pointed towards the bedroom, so the camera was not facing the door.
Oh,
And
darn.
I really wish that we had more than one camera up there. We did not. But fast forward to that same night, myself and the lead investigator, we had gone back inside the house, and it was just the two of us, and we were trying to get, something to repeat, some form of activity to take place. And the lead investigator, I remember him saying something along the lines of, why don't you just open the door for us like you did earlier? And then I remember hearing a click, and the front door had opened. And we did actually catch that on video. And it was
Oh,
kind of hard to
wow.
see because it was dark. But what was really telling was the infrared light from the cameras was reflecting off of the glass on the front door, and you could see
Oh.
the infrared light shift a little bit in the positioning. And we don't know if that was, maybe we didn't latch the door properly when we came in the front door. Maybe again, it was just because of the weather conditions and it was so humid that the door didn't latch properly. Or maybe it was, in fact, some sort of spiritual entity that had opened the door, right?
Yeah. Well,
And
really
so
convenient that you asked it to do something like that and it happened.
exactly, right? And that's what was always intriguing, was these occurrences. And it wasn't just those occurrences. We had other situations too where it did seem to be in direct response to the questions that we were asking or the conversations that were being held.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the part that was always intriguing, right? Because certainly there are coincidences that could take place, but there are a lot of things that we had heard um, that just seemed too coincidental. It was yeah, it was intriguing, it was exciting, it was frightening, and it's made for a really cool story all these years later.
Definitely. Yeah. That's an awesome story to have. So I guess how did that kind of turn into, is that what kind of made you start the Curious Narrative, your radio show?
Actually, that came along because of TikTok. So,
Oh.
yeah, so I started, well, when COVID first happened, I was one of the millions, I'm sure, that, joined TikTok and would kill time by just scrolling through. And it was probably close to 2 years that I had been like, one of those quiet observers lurking in the background. And last summer, we left Saskatoon and we moved to a small rural community. And I remember thinking like, I just need some creative outlet. So it was actually last year I thought, well, I think on January 1st, I'll start making TikToks. And then Betty White had died, and it
Right.
turned out that the first TikTok that I made was just like a little tribute to Betty White. And so that began my TikTok journey. And then I tried to post something every day, and I remember watching lots of like experienced TikTokers talking about finding your niche and your audience and everything. And I just did not know what my niche or what my audience was. And I thought eventually I'll stumble across it. And that actually happened. And it turned out to be Saskatchewan based content is where my niche is. And again, stumbled across it, because I was watching another Saskatchewan content creator who was talking about town slogans, and he had
Oh,
mentioned how Outlook was the friendliest place by a dam site. And I was like, no, that's not Outlook. That is Crake. And I know that because that happened to be my favorite town slogan. Like I always got a kick out of driving down Highway 11 and seeing that sign. And I was like, maybe I should do something about that. So I started with Saskatchewan city slogans, and that blew up. Like it shocked me. I think the first TikTok that I did on Saskatchewan city slogans got like 35,000 views, which
oh
for me was
wow.
a huge number.
Yeah.
And so I stayed with it, and I wound up doing over 100 Saskatchewan communities, and got to a point where it was just difficult to find slogans because they were either very small communities or maybe they didn't have any. And so I needed something to keep the Saskatchewan content going. And
Right.
then ghost stories. Like I remember talking with people, and because it was around this time that I had just received access to TikTok Live as well. So I was able to
Oh,
start talking to my followers or interacting with them. And yeah, people were intrigued by the ghost stories. So that's when I started Scary Saskatchewan, which is a little TikTok series highlighting some of Saskatchewan's best known ghost stories. So we talked about, and really it was just retelling these stories
right.
because they've been around forever and a day. And I think, I mean, people all over the place have heard about the St. Louis Ghost Light or Fort San, the Mar residence in Saskatoon. And
Yeah.
so it was just kind of retelling these stories that have been around forever, and that really gained traction and people really found interest in that. And then I was actually on TikTok Live once, and the folks who run Cosmos Astrum Radio happened to come across my live, and they had watched some of my TikToks before. And she said, hey, do you think you might be interested in like hosting a show about ghost stories and the paranormal and stuff? And uh, I had worked in radio before, but I was behind the scenes. I did promotion stuff, and I had always wanted to like do the on air thing, but
Yeah.
just never made it there. And so I was like, I don't know, like, should I do this? This seems like a cool opportunity. And I waffled back and forth. And then I finally said, you know what, let's go with it. So, uh, yeah, the Curious Narrative came along just because of the TikTok series. And it's just a weird turn of events that has really given me a chance to do something that I find to be quite interesting and hopefully share stories with more people, because at the end of the day that's really what I like to do is share stories. And I'm really hoping that we can expand the series and go beyond just like the best known stories,
Hmm.
because I have stories, you may have stories, other viewers, other listeners might have stories, and those are the ones that we haven't heard yet, and
Right.
those are the ones that I'm hoping to be able to tell at some point in time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think that's really interesting, especially doing the unknown stories, the ones that haven't been, you know, told many, many times over, and you don't even know where the origin came from anymore, for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly, for sure. And that's what, like with the Curious Narrative, what I wanted to do was create um, a platform basically for people to share those stories, those ones that
Hmm.
we haven't heard. And along the way, like we do actively have well, the last Wednesday of each month, I always try to do kind of an open phone session. So we don't have any
Ah,
guests or anything like that. It really is just sometimes it's me talking for an hour because we aren't getting phone calls, but oftentimes we do end up with people who do call in and they do share their stories about a wide variety of topics. We don't just focus on the ghosts and paranormal. We've actually talked with psychics and mediums. We've talked with
oh,
um, a parapsychologist who is very much involved in the world of like reincarnation and the research into reincarnation. We've talked with paranormal investigators, Sasquatch researchers. Like it really is just a wide spectrum of topics. And it has been an interesting journey so far. And we're still like we're still quite new at this whole thing too, because the show just started this past June. So we are still finding our footing and still building an audience. And hopefully, as we continue to do that, we'll be able to secure more guests and, keep the conversation going.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Just keep scaling from there. Hey.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess kind of based on that, do you have any either current projects that you're kind of starting to work on or any dreams of projects you're hoping to eventually pick up?
Um, well, so we're close to Halloween, so
Of course.
I've taken kind of a break from the whole scary Saskatchewan thing for the last little while, and we've been doing other Saskatchewan based content or Saskatchewan themed content. But I have some ideas on how I want to like resurrect scary Saskatchewan, so to speak. And so I'm working on the ideas for that, and it will be kind of again basically retelling some of our most exciting or most viewed videos that we've had through the Scary Saskatchewan. I've actually been invited to participate in some paranormal investigations again,
Oh, fun.
and so there might be something happening in October that, if all the pieces fall into place, will create some opportunity for, I think, some exciting content on TikTok. And then with the Curious Narrative, I have a wish list of guests that I would like to speak to in terms of, some of the, I guess, more well-known um, uh, stars in the world of
Oh,
paranormal entertainment, I guess.
yeah.
Uh, there's one guy, like I think he's on my ultimate wish list. His name is Josh Gates. I don't know if you're familiar with Josh Gates, but he hosts a TV show called Expedition Unknown
Oh,
on Discovery.
yes.
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 And um, I first found him many years ago when he hosted a TV show called Destination Truth, and they would explore all these urban legends around the world, ranging from things like chupacabra to um, uh, Sasquatch and aliens and all of this stuff. And I just feel like he's such an entertaining person that I feel like he would just be a fun person to speak with. But just being able to pick his brain about his experiences would
Oh,
be, I
definitely.
think, amazing. And so that's kind of where I'm hoping to go with the Curious Narrative as well. But um, I'm also committed to taking the time to make sure that we grow at a pace that is manageable, because I still have a full-time day job and all of this other stuff. So it's just, trying to balance the radio show with the TikTok content and then family life and work life and all that stuff, which is, I'm finding, I can see now why people who commit to, a social media content creation lifestyle often choose to, quit the day job and focus on the content creation, because it really is a full-time job.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you're trying to do every day. That's a big commitment.
Yeah, for sure. And some of the things, like one of my series I did was like, you might be from Saskatchewan if, and I know, I mean, there's a whole series of books about that. I think, kind of the toilet readers, but I always tried to find like just little random Saskatchewan things that I thought was interesting. Like, you might be from Saskatchewan if, I say, where are we going? And your reaction is to say higher because of Telemiracle, right?
Yeah, of
And
course.
so little things like that. And those were quick and easy because it was like, 10 seconds to record, and there wasn't much that had to be done in the way of preparing a script or anything.
Yeah.
So I try to find opportunities where I could do stuff like that, interspersed with some of the things that do require a bit more time to prepare a
Yeah.
script. Because even though you are just, or at least in my case, just retelling stories, I do try to put it in my voice just so that it sounds like it's me speaking, so it's natural
Yeah.
and I'm not stumbling over other words or,
Someone other
things.
sayings or that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. I do this very similar with the Haunted Saskatchewan series. I try to retell their stories, but in my own words. So
Yeah,
it sounds
it
more like it's from you that way. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it's neat too because I like one thing that I've realized just TikTok stuff with Scary Saskatchewan and the Curious Narrative is that there really is like an unlimited amount of stories out there. It's just a matter
Mm.
of like tracking them down and finding people. I mean, I just got an email last night, and it was just some pictures. And I think there might be like, they believe there's a like a Sasquatch in these photos.
Oh.
Um, and I've kind of been going back and forth and I've asked them to tell me a bit more, but they just haven't told me exactly what's in the pictures. But there is like a large brown
Something.
being in and amongst these trees. Now, is it a bear? Maybe. Is it something more? I don't know. But that's what I've found intriguing too, is people that are just, willing to send me pictures and share. I had another person because I did dabble in scary Saskatchewan true crime for a while.
Mm.
And that was just before summer. And then summer came along and that was there was a lot more work involved with preparing true crime stuff. So I didn't do too many of those videos because then summer got in the way, and we always enjoy our summers. But there was somebody who reached out to me because of that, and they grew up on a farm, and their grandfather knew their neighbor who had been framed for murder, and he had these pictures of
Oh, wow.
tombstones that were in the forest, or like on this property, because that's where the person had been buried, and all of this stuff, right? So the stories are there. It's just a matter of, finding folks who are comfortable enough to come forward and share their stories, and then, give you permission to share their stories as well, because
Exactly. Yeah.
uh, they're I am more than happy to share them, but I obviously want to make sure that I have their permission to tell their stories, because at the end of the day, the stories aren't mine; they are, the my viewers and my listeners, and I'm just very thankful that they're open
Yeah.
to sharing that with me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I find that really interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, so trying to think what else we could cover. I guess you talked about kind of your bucket list of who you hope to get on the show, but you're also talking about maybe getting into paranormal investigations again. And I know we kind of talked about it when I was on your show, but I thought we could talk about it again here. And what's your bucket list of
Flip the
investigation
tables.
locations?
Yeah. So I'd mentioned on the show last night that if I could pick a location, one of the bucket list items is, or list items is certainly the Winchester Mansion or the
Of
Winchester
course.
Mystery House.
Yep.
Um, but I think too, again, just being closer to home, I I think this would be incredibly difficult, and the facility would probably have to shut down before this would be allowed. But the Saskatchewan Penitentiary, I
Oh,
think, would
yeah.
be a very interesting place. Um, Even sticking in Prince Albert, Kinsman Park.
Oh, yes, I've heard about that.
Yes, because of the stories around Kinsman Park and the old town, or yeah, I guess it would have been the old town hall or old city hall in Prince Albert as well, are certainly some locations that have intrigued me. I also think that uh, going outside of Saskatchewan, uh, again, I don't know why prisons are on my mind so much, but the Kingston Penitentiary would be another location. I think the old Ottawa jail, which is now a hostel, I think
Oh,
would be
yeah.
interesting as well. And then the one place that, because I do have my family, or I guess my in laws, live in Winnipeg. So we frequently visit Winnipeg. And the Fort Garry Hotel in Winnipeg has a story about one of their rooms being very haunted.
Oh,
Um, and that because the stories are like terrifying. I mean, the story is about a young woman who learned her husband had been killed in an accident, and then she returned to her room. Where oh, we're running out of time,
Yeah,
hey?
10 minutes it says.
Yeah. Um, but she returned to her room and wound up committing suicide in the closet by hanging herself.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And so, I mean, there is that dark story, but then the paranormal stories that come with it, people and like even elected officials who have stayed in this room have reported like seeing entities standing at the foot of their bed. One person reported like being startled awake because like, she could feel somebody crawling into bed with her.
Oh wow.
Um, and then this again, there are parts of stories that I think, okay, even that's a little too far fetched to be true, but maybe it is. But people have reported in this room seeing blood dripping from the walls.
Oh,
Um, and so those are stories that take place in this, I think it's a room 202 at the Fort Garry Hotel in Winnipeg. So that would be
that would be an
a
interesting one.
place. And I thought maybe one of these times when I'm in Winnipeg, I'll see if I can book the room for a night and maybe do like a TikTok live stream or something from the
Oh,
room and
that
see
would be
if anything
fun.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Those are there's probably a lot more on that list if I thought about it a bit longer, but those are some of the places that come to mind fairly quickly.
Yeah. No, that would be really interesting for sure. I guess what else could we talk about? Oh, let's go back to scary Saskatchewan. Do you have a favorite story? I know we talk about the St. Louis light a lot, but is that your favorite story, or do you have a different favorite story that you've
Uh
come across?
That probably is my favorite story, mainly because I do have some pretty fond memories of trying to find the ghost light. So just the legend of that, and then my own experiences. I've never been able to actually see the light, but I have lots of, as weird as it may be to have gone into a situation where we are exploring the paranormal, just the laughs that came with friends in those adventures certainly come to mind. So that's probably my favorite story. But I think if I had to pick other stories just off the top of my head, the stories about Fort San
Mm,
would be up there as well. I never had the opportunity to visit Fort San. I have friends that, had been there as cadets and stuff, and they
right.
all had their stories and experiences. Um, and then the other one that I've always found intriguing, well, I can't say always because I just learned about it through Scary Saskatchewan, but it's McKim Road, which is between Yorkton and Melville on Highway 10. And that's another story about a ghost light where people have reported being on this light and or on this road rather, and you can see this ghost light coming to you. And they say
Oh,
that if you park your car and sit there with the lights off, you can actually hear a motor. Because the story is that it was a man riding a motorcycle who had collided with a truck and he
oh,
lost his life. And so you can hear the motorcycle approaching, and some say that you can even see the dust rising up and it'll settle on your car. And some people have reported seeing handprints on their vehicle.
oh, wow.
And people have also reported trying to chase the light, and they're able to chase it for a certain period of time before it just vanishes into
Disappears.
thin air. Yeah. So that one is another one of my favorite stories. And there are YouTube videos that you can check out where people have gone and have
Sat there.
recorded this light. Yeah.
Oh,
Um, and so that I think is probably my other favorite story. Maybe it's just something about the ghost lights. I don't know, but
the
but
unexplained
yeah,
lights.
exactly, exactly. So those are
Yeah.
probably some of my favorite stories. There are some that I haven't even shared yet just because the length of them. So a lot of like the source material too, the good old ghost stories of Saskatchewan books. I've tried to use those, but I also try to keep the videos relatively short, like
Hmm.
within a minute, 2 minutes max. And so there are a number of stories that I haven't shared yet, just because I feel like if I pared them down anymore, you would lose too much, and they're not exciting. But I also try to, even though I'm not a historian, I always do try to incorporate some sort of historical aspect to it, because that's what I find interesting as well. So even if it's just a couple of extra dates, that kind of create a better image in your mind, because
Hmm.
when I'm telling these stories too, it's just me in front of the camera. It's not like I'm using, pictures or illustrations or anything. So I really kind of rely on the theater of the mind. So if I
Right.
can, you know, use a date or something that will hopefully give somebody the ability to think about, oh, so in like 1967, people were kind of dressed like this, and I don't know if it works that way. That's how I hope it works. When you're drawing on theater of the mind
Yep.
and stuff like that. But yeah, that kind of a long answer to your question, but
No, that's okay. I guess, do you ever plan on trying to visit some of the locations yourself to put it on
yes,
TikTok?
I do actually. So the investigation that might happen next month is one of my TikTok videos.
Oh,
It probably is or the most popular Scary Saskatchewan TikTok video. So I guess if somebody wanted to go back and check out what video for Scary Saskatchewan has the most views, you'd probably figure it out. But so that might happen. The McKim Road one is something that I would also like to check out. I've also heard lots of stories about the Indian Head Screaming House.
yes.
And that is another one where, again, we drive past it all the time going to Winnipeg.
Yep.
And one of these days, even if it's not to do an investigation, just stopping and taking a look at it, I think would be fun and interesting. And yeah, and certainly if somebody has a story where they think, hey, you should come out and see this, I'd be open to hearing about that and visiting, a reportedly haunted location as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's the same with me. It's always interesting to find out other people's stories and try to go see it for yourself. See if you can replicate what they say.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's definitely one of the cool things is just being able to like I said before, just hearing the stories from people.
Yeah, share
And
experiences and
yeah. And then even I find too, even if it's not like hearing stories directly from people, but I always find just bringing up the paranormal um, is a good conversation starter, because I'm always surprised that like there are people who do not seem like they would believe or that they would have any stories. And then you bring it up, and then it's like, oh, yeah, my sister-in-law lived in this house and they always talked about blah blah blah, and it's like, yeah, it's one of those things, I think, where there's probably lots of closet paranormal fans
oh,
that
definitely.
just aren't comfortable coming out yet, but eventually they will, and then we'll have who knows how many more stories to tell.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
noticed that as well. As soon as you, especially as soon as you say you do something in paranormal, a lot more people are willing to talk about
Yeah,
it.
exactly. I find I'm also a wrestling fan, and that is another place where I always thought, like, because I was one of those people who's like, I don't tell people that I like wrestling. And now that's changed, but it was always one of those things. Like, I worked with a guy who was like this very straight-laced accountant, and I remember mentioning something about wrestling, and he's like, "Oh, you watch wrestling?" And he goes on to this, you know, him and his brothers used to do this whole big wrestling like draft thing. And I was like, yeah, I mean, there are so many people out there that have an interest in these things but don't talk about it. And I think that's true for paranormal as well.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Mhm.
Well, it looks like we're running out of time here, so I guess that's where we will stop today. But thank you so much for doing this. Very excited to get it up on the YouTube channel.
Yeah,
One
you're
of these
welcome.
days, maybe I'll figure out live, or you could teach me how to do the live thing. But
Yeah, sounds good. That's a cool thing too about live is that you can have conversations on TikTok live as well. So
yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
one day.
Yeah,
All
sounds good.
right.
Cool.
Well,
Well, have a good night.
yes, you too.
All
Have a
right.
good rest of your night. Thank
Thanks, you
you.
too. You're welcome. Bye
Bye.
bye.
All right, my ghouls. First, thanks to Josh for being on the Ghoul Community Spotlight with me. It was fun having this as my very first video as a part of the series. As I mentioned, it's probably going to be a monthly series, I'm hoping. So watch out for next month's spotlight. I have someone in mind, but I just have to convince them to say yes. If you know of anyone that you think should be on the spotlight, they just need to jump over to my website at kdkulpa.com and they can join the Ghoul community through there and maybe be featured in one of these spotlights in the upcoming months. Until next time, my ghouls.